let's talk a little bit about the structure of the lens itself. So the lens itself really contains two sets of cells. So you have the epithelium and have these fiber cells, right? And why is this important? Well, damage can occur to both of them, and we'll talk about the types of damage that can occur to them. And as you can see, what seems like just like a transparent set of or hardened capsulated version of cells is actually quite complex. It has this anterior capsule, which is this area of cells that, as the term implies, encapsulates the lens. And that was actually what that patient was referring to, and that this capsule, after the lens was removed during cataract surgery, had become clouded over, and that's a known complication. It has epithelial cells, which grow on the outermost surface, the anterior surface of the lens. And then you have these fibers that comprise the lens that are just very, very thin cells and there are multiple fibers that are arranged in this concentric circular fashion. Why this is important is damage can occur to both the epithelium and these lens fibers that will cause it to eventually become clouded over. We'll talk about those two main types of damage in just a second. And what happens is, after they get damaged, you'll get decreased transparency through this, because remember, the light travels through the lens and then it refracts to certain areas of the retina. And when it becomes cloudy, it spreads and your images then become distorted. So why would your lens become cloudy? What would cause damage to these cells? Well, we can describe it in forms of two main processes: oxidative stress and glycation. And oxidative stress, well, that really is just stress secondary to free radical formation. And we know that that is a very common byproduct from mitochondrial metabolism, as well as inflammation. White blood cells tend to release these reactive oxygen species, which are useful in killing pathogens, but unfortunately in excess can cause a lot of damage. And these in turn, this oxidative stress, too much of these reactive oxygen species can cause damage to both the epithelium and the lens. And so when it causes problems to the damage to the epithelium, it can potentially cause issues with the capsule. When it causes damage to the lens fibers, it can cause them to be rearranged so they're not in this concentric fashion and kind of be in disarray. And that's what's linked to the cloudiness, the opaqueness versus the transparency. It's due to a particular protein that's found within the fibers called crystalline. Crystalline is a protein that seems to get damaged most intensely and cause the disfigurement of the lens fibers. Another thing that can occur is glycation. Glycation is where sugar molecules will bind to proteins, in particular crystalline, and that can also cause disruption. And they can cause things called advanced glycation end products. And so if you have enough of these proteins that are bound to glucose and eventually turn into advanced AGEs, advanced glycation end products, it rapidly accelerates the process of cloudiness or opacity within the lens. So both these processes are things we do not want to have occur or limit significantly. And then there are other risk factors, some of which we can change, some of which we can't. So age apparently is one of them. 55, greater than 55 is associated with it. Gender, females tend to get them more often than males. Poor nutrition, diabetes, things that we can certainly improve upon. Ionizing radiation, so both exposure to the sun, like ultraviolet radiation, or workplace exposure. So if you're in an area where you're exposed to x-rays, perhaps a dental office or in the hospital, other things like lifestyle-oriented activities like smoking or alcohol consumption, as well as certain medications. Long-term corticosteroid use like prednisone is associated with cataracts. And then for an unfortunate few individuals, genetics can play a role, and this is primarily that in terms of children, because some children, unfortunately, are born with cataracts.